Okay. Oh, also, if you hadn't already subscribed at this point, go on ahead and do so, and you'll get notified whenever I upload these and any other videos I upload, essentially. And apparently, the note that Ferdinand sent her, the 3-page thing, when she asked, what that phrase meant, that was apparently the noble's equivalent of the birds and the bees. I want to read that! I want to read that so much! Just because, what the freak would he have said to her? Seriously. That's what I want to know. But anyway, I want to do library committee work. Library, oh library, I'm finally free! On this most glorious of mornings, Brunhilde helped me put on my library committee armband, all while groaning about how poorly it suited my outfit. And then I made my way to the dining hall. Let us go to the library at once, I said. Unfortunately, you must wait until tomorrow when you have retainers available to accompany you, Cornelius replied, refusing me instantly. It seemed that today was dinner practice, and all apprentice knights were going to be participating as part of their practical lessons. Please spend today in your room with Feline. You will not have any guards this morning, so do not leave until we return for lunch. Lenore will return in the afternoon, but even then, one person is not enough for you to go to the library. You may venture only as far as the common room. Is that understood? I responded with an obedient nod. Cornelius's dark eyes left no room for disagreement. I understood that my selfishness simply wouldn't fly when it came to apprentice knights attending an important class, but still, it kinda sucked. And after I worked so hard to pass all my classes, Lady Rosemine, it was for times like this that Lord Ferdinand gave you books, Hartman noted. Might I suggest reading them today and studying magic circles and tools? You will need to learn both in order to construct your perfect library. You're as wise as ever, Hartmut. There was no helping that I couldn't leave the dorm, but I could at least read the book that Hartmut received from Ferdinand. Excitement coursed through me, and my heart throbbed at the thought of laying the groundwork for my dream library. You managed to complete Lord Ferdinand's task flawlessly before, Lady Rosamond, so I'm confident you will succeed again, Hartmut said. Indeed, I had technically completed the task of combining the 2 magic circles into one, using the book as guidance. If everything was correct, books that weren't handed in by their due date would return to the library automatically. And I worked extra hard to make sure they return to their proper place on the shelves too, although I did need Hartmut to walk me through about 70% of the process. Wow! Hartmut had said that I was expecting a little too much out of a single circle, but this was supposed to be my perfect library. I couldn't just quit when things got tough. Plus, combining several circles into one had been my task in the first place. I was just pushing that a little further than expected. Now, milady, it is time for your new book. I waited in my room after breakfast, and soon enough Riarda came over with the book from Hartmut. She set it on my desk in front of both Feline and me. What book are we reading today, I wonder? Feline mused aloud. Oh, look, Lady Rosemine, there's another note wedged between the pages. Okay. It was from Ferdinand. Apparently by embroidering a slightly modified version of the tools used to quiet voices in the temple onto some carpet, one could give it sound dampening qualities. So this task involves embroidery too. Ha ha. You can't avoid it forever. Feline must have noticed my frown as she gave a few words of encouragement, saying we should work hard since it will be lovely to read in a quiet environment. She had continued transcribing books and gathering stories in the Royal Academy while I was away for the dedication ritual, and she had been surprised by how loud and busy the library became once final exams approached. The library is generally occupied by those of the lower-ranking duchies, but though there were constant battles for the chorales and study guides, Feline recalled, it made it quite difficult for me to be there. As a lay noble, Feline was at the bottom of the totem pole, so she would instead take the books to the dormitory and transcribe them there while I was absent. I had the deposit money that you gave me, and even brought Judith so that I would not be in danger carrying the books back to the dormitory, she continued. The lay nobles of the bottom-ranking duchies were not so fortunate, however. They had no choice but to study in the chorales, which put them in a terribly rough situation. The library Feline spoke of sounded entirely different from the one I knew. I was aware that things got busy there, but not that it was chaotic enough to warrant having a guard night. There would be less fighting over chorales if one could take out books for free, but my voice trailed away. All the disorder that Feline had described was because the students were too poor to borrow the books they needed. We could remedy that by removing the deposit, but this would result in there being fewer books available on the shelves. Resolving the problem seemed difficult, if not impossible, without producing enough books that people could always get the ones they wanted. I wonder when I can start spreading the printing industry. It's hard to say without observing Dronko and the sovereignty first. No matter how much I thought about it, there wasn't much I could do for the Royal Academy Library. Supplying money to Schwartz and Weiss was about it. Lady Rosemont, is something wrong? No, not at all. Let us read. This magic circle wasn't particularly hard to make. I simply needed to change the area of effect for the sound dampening, and that was that. Hartman had definitely given us the books in the wrong order, and it was as I contemplated this that Judith came to get me for lunch. Her morning classes had ended. Oh, it's not that he messed up the order. He gives me the books based on how long he thinks it'll take me to read them. Which means Ferdinand must be the one pulling the strings here, not Hartman. I had a feeling that the books were divided into 3 groups. Those that would take me half a day, those that would take an entire day, and those that would take several days. It was the same way he had divided up the documents for Herscher. He's treating me the same as Professor Herscher. I'm actually kind of shocked. I spent my afternoon practicing the Hirschspiel and studying for next year, and then excitedly headed to the library the next day. While wearing my armband, of course. Judith and Lenore were coming along as my guard knights, Hartman and Felina as my scholars, and Riarda and Lazetta as my attendants. Milady returned. Reading books, milady. Schwartz and Weiss walked over to greet me, and I stroked the face stones on their foreheads to resupply them with mana. Solange's blue eyes widened when she saw us, and she approached as well a moment later. My, you certainly are early, she said. You truly never fail to surprise, Lady Rosemine. Professor Solange, Schwartz, Weiss, I have finished my second-year classes, and will try to come to the library as many times as I can before the dedication ritual. This is even earlier than last year, is it not? Solange asked. I nodded in response. Last year, circumstances had prevented me from passing High Beast Creation right away. But there had been no such issues with my practical lessons this time. Next year, however, I was going to be taking both the Scholar course and the Archduke Candidate course. I expected that it would take me a lot longer to gain access to the library as a result. I wanted to come to the library as soon as possible, I said. I have Schwartz and Weiss's clothes to deliver. When shall we change them? During the Archduke conference, the sovereignty had apparently expressed some concern over whether Ehrenfest would be able to handle making the shoemills close. Ferdinand was satisfied with our results, though, so I trusted they would suffice. Milady, amazing! New clothes! Getting clothes from the new master was apparently very important to Schwartz and Weiss. I could somehow sense that they were excited. Wow. These are magic tools, guys! These are magic tools! They are not alive! Wow! This much emotion. Huh. I wish to borrow a room in the library so that I may change Schwartz and Weiss's clothes. I understand that it is proper for their master to do this in their own quarters, but I fear that taking them outside will result in another incident like the one last year, I said. It was better to prevent problems before they occurred. Solange looked around and then smiled. I can lend you my office if we schedule for before the students begin to arrive, she said. It warmed my heart. She had refused my request last year, so it seemed that our bond was deeper now. When would be a good time, I asked. Lazetta, do you have a preference? Me? Lazetta asked, taken aback. Indeed, you worked immensely hard on embroidering their outfits. Is it not natural that you should be there when we changed our clothes? Lazetta began contemplating the matter. Seeing her dark green eyes pierce the empty air as she frowned made her look very much like an Angelica when she was thinking of ways to grow stronger. Your other retainers and I are most likely to be free in the afternoon 3 days from now, she eventually replied. Professor Herscher does not have a class then either. I was amazed not only because she knew Herscher's schedule, but also because she had the forethought to know that Herscher would simply abandon whatever lesson she was teaching otherwise. That day will do, Solange said. I will also be free then. Yeah, Herscher would abandon her class if it meant she got to be around for Schwartz and Weiss's outfit changes. And so the matter was settled. Professor Solange, regarding our plans for a tea party in the library, Lady Hannelore has said that she will be free in the morning starting next week, I said. Would that work for you? That is soon enough to not be a problem. As you can see, we have barely any visitors, she replied, laughing as she looked over the empty reading room. In that case, we may do it early next week. I suppose it would be best for us to meet after Schwartz and Weiss are changed. I wish for Lady Hannelore to see the new clothes as well, I said. I'm just so excited. I can't wait for the two of us to serve on the library committee. Behold, my armband. I showed off the band on my arm, which Solange regarded with a curious expression. You said a library committee member is someone who assists with library work, correct? She asked. Yes, we will assist you when things get busy here, as they did toward the end of last year. My time spent helping at the library and prompting Ferdinand to send out all those reminder ordinances had been more fun than I could ever describe. I was looking forward to doing it again this year, but Solange met my swelling excitement with a look of concern. I'm truly grateful for your enthusiasm, Lady Rosemine, but the time you are here is when we have the fewest students. There will be nothing for you to do. What a nightmare. She's pretty much saying she doesn't need the library committee. Still, I understand what she was saying. The library only started to get busy after I returned to Ehrenfest for the dedication ritual. There really wouldn't be much for me to do right now when there are so few students around. You are doing more than enough by supplying Schwartz and Weiss of mana, Solange said. I could not bother an Archduke candidate to do any more. I slumped my shoulders. As much as I wanted to help out as a member of the library committee, Solange had turned me down. Persisting any further was equivalent to threatening her with my status, and that was the last thing I wanted to do. Upon seeing my disappointment, Hartman knelt down to whisper to me, "Were you not going to ask what manner of magic tools are used in the library? Perhaps improving them could serve as one of your duties in the library committee." "Hartman, I thank you ever so much," I said, looking up with newfound enthusiasm the moment I heard that. There were still ways for me to do committee work fit for an Archduke candidate without getting in Solange's way. "Professor Solange, are there any magic tools in the library that you feel need to be renewed or changed?" "Why do you ask?" Solange replied, resting a hand on her cheek. I puffed out my chest because I intend to make a library of my own one day, and to that end I want to know how this one is managed. "Oh my, your own library? That's such a grand and wonderful dream," Solange chuckled, and then told me all about the library's magic tools. There were several in addition to the lights that pulled students from their reading hypnosis when it was time for class. In fact, there were even magic circles carved into the building itself to make it the perfect environment for books. What the heck? That's amazing! According to a book I had read during my Arano days, preservation was a massive issue in stone monasteries and churches. Papyrus was cheaper than parchment but would rot or go moldy within a number of years, so those overseeing their collections would need to either rewrite the texts received from afar on new papyrus every few years or have them transcribed onto parchment. Storing books was also an issue because they couldn't be placed against the building's stone walls, otherwise moisture that gathered on the stone would damage the books. Lining the walls with wood paneling had consequently become a necessity. In this world, however, all those problems were solved in an instant using a single magic circle. I regret that I cannot show you the building's magic circles directly, but there is a book about magic circles in the Royal Palace's library, Solange continued. Furthermore, I seem to recall the Sovereignty's treasure vault similarly using magic circles to control the humidity and temperature. Sounds like sovereign magic circles are super high-tech. Ehrenfest could learn a thing or two from them. Then again, considering that those magic circles all required mana to maintain, I understood why Ehrenfest would struggle to copy them. Simply losing a few nobles would be enough to make them entirely unsustainable. Running the library is far more manageable with Schwartz and Weiss, Solange said. They've already taken charge of corral usage and the lending out of our reading materials, which was simply too much for one person to oversee with everything being done by hand. It seemed that there were a lot of things she hadn't been able to do when she was running the library on her own. Hearing that made me really want a Schwartz and Weiss of my own for the Rosemine Library. I am in the middle of researching a magic circle to make books return automatically on their due dates, I explained. I simply need to decide where on the book it's best to place it. That is quite a convenient idea, but putting a magic circle onto every book would require an exorbitant amount of mana. I am wholly confident you can maintain that many, but I do not believe I could. It would take a sizable quantity of mana to attach a magic circle to each book, and then ensure it ran properly. They would need to be improved. In that case, are there any other magic tools you would suggest, Professor Solange? Perhaps the tool we spoke of previously, the one that would speak in Lord Ferdinand's voice. He played such a key role in getting students to return their books last year. I understand that he will not always be free to help, but so a magic tool with his voice would prove quite useful. Magic tools for recording voices already existed, but Solange would never normally have the chance to request a recording from Ferdinand. Still, seeing how her regretful expression confused me a little. I agreed that it was impressive how many students have responded to his message, but surely she could use somebody else's voice instead. Would a professor of the Royal Academy not suffice, I asked? I am sure Professor Roffin's voice would achieve the same effect. The students are already familiar with the voices of all the professors, so it is hard to imagine anyone being nearly as effective as Lord Ferdinand. Everyone certainly did come running. Very well, I shall ask him. There's a chance he might refuse, but then maybe I could ask Angelica for a recording from Stenlook. Nah, that'd be a good idea, actually. With that settled, we headed to Solange's office so that I could retrieve the face stones Ferdinand had given me. Solange no longer needed them now that I was able to come to the library. These face stones were a great help, Solange said. Please do thank Lord Ferdinand for me. Yes, I will. And speaking of which, are you familiar with the Gramps figure? Gramps, she repeated. No, I am not aware of anyone who is addressed as such. I had figured she would know, considering that this was a matter related to the library, but apparently not. When I supplied Mana to the Grucheshite in the hands of the Mestinora statue on the second floor, Schwartz and Weiss said that it would please this Gramps person, whoever they are. It absorbed quite a bit of my mana, I explained. Solange looked down and thought, a magic tool even older than Schwartz and Weiss, perhaps? This library has many magic tools, more than half of which are no longer kept running. One of them may be the Gramps they speak of, Solange muttered. She gazed toward the back of her office before sighing and shaking her head. Unfortunately, there is much I do not know about this library and its history. As a med noble, my role here was simply to assist the archnobles, and their abrupt disappearances meant I never properly succeeded them. There are many things that I know only in part, that I may be mistaken about, and that I do not know at all. Archnobles carried out very different duties than med nobles, and their execution had occurred with little warning that they had not properly trained any successor. Or so little warning that they had not properly trained any successors. A single med noble didn't have the mana required to supply the magic tools that had previously been supported by several archnobles at once, so at the moment only the bare minimum was being kept running. I may learn more when the sovereignty thrives again, and we are sent archnobles who will allow me to enter their rooms, Solange said, her eyes lowered sadly. She then looked at me and forced a smile. Now then, enough of that. You may enjoy reading at your leisure, Lady Rosemine. That is why you are here, no? I gave the face stones to Riarda and then returned to the reading room with Solange. The moment I opened the door, my eyes widened in surprise. The previously empty reading room now had around 10 people inside. They had just arrived, it seemed, and they were just as surprised to see us. Uh-oh. Oh, no. Oh, no. Oh, dear. At the center of the group was none other than Prince Hildebrand, whom I had assumed would be staying in his room at all times. He blinked his bright purple eyes at us several times, and then looked around, making his blue-tinged silver hair sway to and fro. I came because I was told there are no students in the library at this time of year. What are you doing here? He asked. Hildebrand had apparently sneaked here under the impression that nobody would notice him, which made him the best prince ever, as far as I was concerned. I could only hope that he would continue growing into a bookworm. Bookworm. Do you not need to be attending your classes? Hildebrand asked. You are an Archduke candidate from Ehrenfest, correct? He remembers me? Even though we've only met once? Wow. Not only was Hildebrand a bookworm, he was exceptionally smart as well. I couldn't believe he remembered me after seeing me just once at the Royal Fellowship gathering. I mean, you are looking his age, so, I mean, of course he's going to remember that. This was my second year at the Royal Academy, yet I didn't know the names and faces of all the Archduke candidates. I could remember the ones among my classmates at most, but even then I was sure to forget a few during my absence for the dedication ritual. I passed my lessons early, specifically so that I could read in the library, I said. I intend to come here to read on a daily basis, but I shan't interfere with your business, Prince Hildebrand. I would ask that you pay me no mind and enjoy your reading. We had met by coincidence, and the last thing I wanted to do was interfere with this young prince's reading. I wanted him to go and read more. More. And in the future, when he grew up to be a bookworm, I would want him to increase the library's funding and purchase more books to fill its shelves. After greeting the prince, I swiftly turned away from him. Schwartz, where might be the documents for improving magic circles and producing magic tools, I asked. Weiss, please guide Prince Hildebrand. Milady's book's over here. Understood, Milady, guiding Hildebrand. I followed Schwartz in my attendance up to the second floor, where I then began reading. I was focusing on the documents on magic tools, and it was then that I realized that the majority of the new research papers had Hersher's name on them. Of course. She's something of a problematic professor, but I could see precisely why Ferdinand embraces her as his teacher. Maybe I should ask her about the magic tools, too. That'd probably be a good idea. I mean, she probably knows something. Professor Hersher's laboratory. After spending my morning looking over several documents, I decided that I should consult Hersher. They were pretty complicated, and I couldn't understand a lot of what was written. Laisletta, when might we have an opportunity to visit Professor Hersher? I asked, remembering that she had committed Hersher's schedule to memory for the sake of planning out Schwartz and Weiss's changing time. You wish to go to her laboratory, Lady Rosemine? She asked, with a troubled and somewhat resistant look. For what purpose? I wish to discuss the library magic tools that I am considering with her. Laisletta looked down at the floor for a moment, deep in thought, and then looked up at me again. In that case, it would indeed be best to go to her laboratory. However, I suggest we do this before Schwartz and Weiss are changed. Once her attention is focused on research, Professor Herscher will pay no mind to accommodating our wishes. I responded with a grave nod. Herscher had a history of getting so absorbed in her research that she abandoned her classes, so I could easily see her abandoning us too. I asked Later to schedule things so that we could see her as soon as possible. I wanted to see whether my improved magic tools and circles were correct, and while I was there, I wanted to ask Herscher if she had any convenient magic tools that would assist me in running the library. You met with royalty again, Rosemine? What did you do? I didn't do anything! All I did was walk into the reading room and boom, he was there! Wilfred exclaimed out of nowhere at dinner. My mind was so preoccupied with magic tools that it took me a moment to even process what he had said. The royalty's magic tools, I asked? You mean Schwartz and Weiss? Lady Rosemine, he means Professor Hildebrand. You met him at the library this morning, remember? Feline prompted. Oh, right. I smacked a fist against my palm in realization. We exchanged greetings. Cornelius peered down at me with an exceedingly concerned expression. Rosemine, don't tell me you forgot, he groaned. Fear not, it had merely fallen into the corner of my mind when things I do not wish to remember end up. Isn't that what people call forgetting? Cornelius muttered. I really hadn't forgotten, though. The information had just taken a short while to come back to me since I didn't really care about it. I did nothing but greet him, I assured everyone. He was there in secret, so I did not wish to bother him. He had aimed for a time when no students were present, and I made it clear that I intended to visit every day from now on, so I did not expect to see him again. There was no way a prince who wanted to remain in the shadow would come to the library when he knew I was going to be there. I seem to remember you saying something similar last year, and yet... Wilfred mumbled, his brow furrowed. I know. Flutrain and Halschmere heal in their own ways, I replied. We were comparing last year to this year, even though Anastasius and Hildebrand were entirely different people. You somehow managed to see the prince, who said that he wouldn't be leaving his room at all. I have no idea what might happen next. We may meet again or we may not. It all depends on the prince, I said with a shrug. As far as I was concerned, it was a waste of time to consider the matter any further. No matter how much I tried to avoid trouble, it always seemed to find me eventually. Yeah, it does. More importantly, we have made plans. It has been decided that we will change Schwartz and Weiss's clothes 3 days from now during the afternoon. This time we need not take them outside the library. I wish to bring some helpers, prioritizing the girls who assisted with the embroidery. Sister, may I come as well? Charlotte asked, her indigo eyes beginning to sparkle. She had assisted with the embroidery in the castle too. I have finished all my written lessons, so I will have time in the afternoon. Of course, Charlotte. We naturally couldn't bring too many people, so we centered the group around Charlotte, me, and our retainers, then chose the other girls while making adjustments based on their schedules. Lady Charlotte, I embroidered as well. I wish to come as well, Lady Brunhilde. As I watched everyone eagerly form the group, Lisletta quickly came to my side and reported that she arranged a meeting with Herscher. It seems she has time tomorrow morning. She would like to introduce you to another student there as well, her disciple. Understood, I replied. Let us go to Professor Herscher's laboratory tomorrow morning. And remember, please refrain from speaking of the clothing matter for the time being, Lisletta warned. I nodded in response. The next day came, and I headed to Herscher's lab in the Scholar Building. I had with me the books from Ferdinand and the magic circles I had created since I wanted to ask her how to improve them. Feline and Hartmut were carrying the documents, Brunhilde was bringing a simple tea set, and Lisletta had a cleaning magic tool for some reason. Cornelius and Lenore were following as guards. Once we reached the door, Lisletta announced our arrival as my apprentice attended. Professor Herscher, Lady Rosamund of Ehrenfest has arrived. Professor, came a male voice from inside. They're calling for you. Well, you're closer, aren't you? Came Herscher's reply. Open the door. It seemed the two of them were arguing. Soon enough, the door creaked open, and a boy stuck his head out. He had disheveled black hair, and his brewing clothes were covered in dust. A look on his face exuded a sense of profound sleepiness, and he just appeared to be kind of dirty overall. I reflexively grimaced, but it all made sense once I saw Professor Herscher's laboratory. There were rather large tables lined up against the walls, each of which was fully covered with tools and mountains of documents. There were papers mixed with food scraps on the floor, which gave me the impression that a particularly tall mountain of paperwork had fallen over at some point in the past. Only the table square in the middle of the room was clear, and I could guess that was because they were brewing there. It was mostly organized so that nothing was mixed unnecessarily. Do come in, Herscher called from inside, but Lisletta stopped me before I could even take my first step. Professor Herscher, she said, this room is not fit for visitors. Did you not say yesterday that you would clean it such that Lady Rosemary could enter without shame? You are right, Herscher replied without an ounce of guilt. That is because this is not a room for visitors. It is a laboratory. Lisletta gave a sigh of disappointment, muttered that this was why she hadn't wanted to bring me here, and then turned her attention back to Herscher. I ask that you put any documents you need on the tables. As Lady Rosemine's attendant, I cannot allow her to enter a room like this, she said, taking out an egg-shaped magic tool with a smile. The expressions on both Hersher's and her disciples' faces changed in an instant, and they immediately rushed to gather all the scattered papers on the floor. Lady, what magic tool is that? I asked. She answered with a smile that it swallowed up everything in a specified area to clean it. One could normally dump all the dust that gathered on furniture onto the floor and then suck it up all at once, since everything on the floor was seen as garbage. This is the first tool we used for preparing long-abandoned rooms for use, Lancelot continued. She then used it and the entire floor was cleaned in an instant. Of course, the tables were now an even bigger mess than before, owing to Hersher and her disciples' hurried attempt at cleaning up, but that wasn't Lancelot's concern. Trying to organize the now precariously tall stacks of documents would take an immense amount of time, so she was turning a blind eye to them. I asked that the two of you at least make yourselves presentable, Lancelot said as she and Brunhilde brought in the sweets and tea set. Hersher's stomach growled when she saw the food. She apparently took all her meals in her laboratory when she ate it all. I would rather not use my mana for anything but research, but very well, Hersher conceded. She used washing to clean herself and her assistant in an instant, almost as if to distract from her stomach rumbling. Then she offered us our seats while reaching for a rejuvenation potion. I would appreciate an introduction, I said, shooting a glance at Hersher's assistant as I sat down. His eyes were locked on the food. Oh my, forgive me, Hersher said with an amused smile. She then introduced me to her new disciple, Raymond, whatever. He was second only to Ferdinand in skill and had gained Hersher's attention during brewing classes last year when he had been putting his all into brewing with as little mana as possible. Ferdinand was a genius when it came to ideas, inventions. Meanwhile, Raymond is only a third year, but he is a genius when it comes to modifications. If you wish to make improvements to your magic tools, Lady Rosemine, I believe conversing with him will be most productive. The disciple knelt before me. May I pray for a blessing and appreciation of this serendipitous meeting ordained by the harsh judgment of Avaglade, the god of life, he asked, using the standard greeting for meeting someone for the first time. I gave my permission and the light of a blessing flew. I am Raymond, an apprentice med noble from Arensbach. Oh, nice to meet you. Arensbach. Oh, dear. In an instant, the expressions of my retainers changed. Everyone took defensive positions, with Cornelius moving between Hersher and me protectively. Professor, your praised disciple is an Arensbach student, he asked. Yes, he is. Do you have a problem with that? Are you unaware of what has been happening between Arensbach and Ehrenfest in recent years? Yet no, I am fully aware. What is your point? Hersher asked, narrowing her eyes and urging Raymond behind her in an equally defensive gesture. Cornelius glared at Hersher, his fist tightly clenched. Are you not ashamed to call yourself Ehrenfest's dormitory supervisor? I may be from Ehrenfest, and I may have been assigned to be the duchy's dormitory supervisor, but I am a Royal Academy professor whose citizenship rests in the sovereignty. All professors move to the sovereignty so that we may raise skilled students for the sake of not one particular duchy, but Jurgensmith as a whole. Hersher said, her face stony and her purple eyes gleaming. That is why it does not matter where my disciple hails from, Cornelius. But Arensbach tried to kidnap Lady Rosemine. Good grief. I cannot tell whether you are stubborn for your age or simply short-sighted due to your youth. It is the duty of a teacher to nurture the remarkably talented among our students. We truly do not have much time in our short, transient lives to grow, and refusing the now for a more convenient later is the same as crushing one's potential. Hersher looked over my still on-guard retainers and then gave a dramatic sigh. You speak so confidently and proudly about the political situation, but politics are ever shifting and unreliable. They can change over a matter of years. It is more important to focus on those with talent, which can actually be relied on. She laced her fingers together on the table and stared directly at me. The clearest example is Ferdinand. When I took him as my prized disciple, the Ehrenfest students moaned to no end about what a terrible mistake it was. Lady Veronica even sent venomous replies to each of my weekly reports, and yet, a mere 10 years later, what remains of those politics? Hersher had raised Ferdinand as her disciple while defending him for Veronica's hatred. He should have become a once-in-a-generation scientist, but instead, following his graduation and around the time of his father's death, he was sent to the temple. Hersher had worried that his talents would waste away there, but Ferdinand eventually returned to noble society and even began raising his own disciple. No one can truly predict how politics will change in their lifetime. Lady Rosemine, had I bowed to the wisdom of the times and shunned Ferdinand, it is likely that you would not even exist as you are right now, Hersher continued flatly. She's not wrong. She raised those with talent based on their results and her own gut feelings, paying no mind to political drama, and she had spent her life living according to that idea. I will repeat to you all the same words I gave to Lady Veronica. I am a sovereign noble and a professor of the Royal Academy. Ehrenfest does not have the authority to decide whom I raise as my disciple and how I raise them. Moved by the thought that Herscher had protected Ferdinand back in the day, I reached out and tugged on Cornelius' sleeve. Professor Herscher is right, Cornelius. Professors may choose whomever they please as their disciple, and at the same time, we may choose to be on guard against Ahrensbach students. We all have our reasons for doing things. Cornelius gave a curt nod and stepped back, although he refused to lower his guard for even a moment. Oh my, it seems my tea has started to cool down. Hoping to lighten the mood, I sipped my tea and ate one of the sweets we had brought, then gestured for Herscher to help herself. She popped a cookie in her mouth and then passed one to Raymond before reaching for the plate of crepes. Raymond wasted no time in devouring his cookie. He then picked up and ate another, and another, and another, his blue eyes sparkling all the while. His movements were graceful since he was a noble, but he was going through them as ravenously as a starving orphan. Still, to think he would come to speak with me, Lady Rosamond, Herscher said, mentally preparing for our conversation as she ate a ham and vegetable crepe. Almost a hamburger. I continued sipping my tea as I watched them chow down. This laboratory really wasn't good for one's health. I could see exactly how Ferdinand had ended up as he was now. I would like for you to teach me everything about magic tools, I said. I am in the process of making some to be used in libraries. Could you perhaps be referring to the magic tools for playing voices that Solange had spoken to me about? Herscher asked. It seemed that Solange had already sent out ordinances to various researchers in the hopes of getting the magic tools she wanted. My goals are broader than just recording magic tools, I replied. I also like to improve existing magic tools so that they are more convenient to use. Furthermore, I created a magic circle of my own after reading books from Lord Ferdinand. Could you check it for me to make sure it works? Raymond gazed up from the crepe he had been given with wide eyes and exclaimed, Books from Lord Ferdinand? He then clapped a hand over his mouth. He had made such an outburst despite how on guard my retainers were. It was only natural that he had drawn everyone's attention. Herscher shook her head with a bemused grin. Raymond has been dedicating himself to improving the magic circles and tools that Lord Ferdinand left behind, she said, explaining for him. It was he who modified the voice recording magic tool that Solange wanted so that even a med noble could use it. Wow! Smart man! Raymond was keeping silent because we were already on guard against him, but he was staring at the books in Hartmut's arms, practically begging to read them. His eyes were shouting, Please, please, please! And who was I to ignore the cries of a fellow bookworm? Hartmut? No, he cut me off with a smile. These are Lord Ferdinand's research results. We cannot show them to someone from another duchy without his permission. I slumped my shoulders as though I were the one being rejected, and then held out the paper containing my magic circle to Herscher. She paused eating, which was very noticeable, considering that her hands had been moving almost non-stop as she reached for this and that, and skimmed my work. After a moment of careful observation, she rubbed her temples with her fingertips. Lady Rosamond, what in the world is this? A magic circle to make books return to the library automatically after their due date. It's unusable, she said with an exasperated expression. I had thought it was sound in theory, but it appeared to be headache-inducing. What's wrong with it, I said. Nothing, it's just unusable. You are truly our Ferdinand's disciple. Nobody would be able to use magic circles designed with Archduke candidate's level of mana in mind. That this is neither practical nor realistic. It's not for Solange's library, but it's for her library. So I think it would work. This is neither practical nor realistic, Herscher concluded, making it clear that my design had too many unnecessary components. Why did you cram this all into one circle? If you put in life, then you will inevitably need earth, which just makes a whole mess of things. The task Ferdinand gave me was to fit everything into a single circle. I suppose learning the theory for that would prove useful, but Herscher trailed off and started tapping her temple as she handed the circle to her disciple. Raymond, modify Lady Rosamond's circle such that you can use it. You may use this opportunity to show her the basics of circle modification. Raymond glared at the circle for a bit and then muttered, I'm impressed you jammed so much into it before beginning his modifications. I made sure to watch his hands carefully as he worked. The fundamental principle behind improving circles is to simplify. Thus, we want to divide this particular circle into two circles, one to return the books to the library when its return date has passed, and another to move it to its place on the shelves. Why two? Because mana is wasted otherwise, he explained. As long as the book is returned to the library Professor Solange can handle the rest. If she has mana to spare, she may use the circle for returning the book to its shelf, but if not, she can simply choose not to. Think of this as separating the essential function from the quality of life ones, because this circle is based on your exceptionally large mana capacity, Lady Rosemine. It will end up useless for someone like Professor Solange. That is certainly true. The reason so many tools fall into disuse following the Civil War is because many of them require so much mana that only royals or archnobles have the capacity to use them. That is why I believe functions should be divided, such that when necessary, even mid-levels and lay nobles can use the tools. Roman continued. He then isolated the theft blocking circle. Making this a separate magic circle will mean we don't need earth and wind here. He was simplifying the circle piece by piece. For a beginner like me, it seemed that keeping my magic circles as simple as possible would help minimize errors. True. You can reduce the mana requirement by making the circles less complicated and selecting the brewing ingredients more carefully, Raymond said. For example, I think you could save on mana for the magic circle that returns books to the library if you write it on the moving paper you invented in Ehrenfest. Why do you know about that, Raymond? I thought we only shared the verification paper with the Sovereignty and Klassenberg, I said, blinking. Everybody knows about that, he replied, looking at me with confusion. Professor Gundolf was raving about it during class. He wants to research it himself, he said. Who is Professor Gundolf? I asked cautiously, unsure how this information was flowing through the academy. Of course! Drowonkle's dormitory supervisor, Hersher answered for him. He's a scientist friend of mine and a good rival. Given that Gundolf was showing interest, using Ehrenfest paper and verification paper as a mixed brew might result in something interesting. Her gaze shifted to me, then her lips curled into the smile of a mad scientist. Lady Rosemine, please just sell me some Ehrenfest paper and some verification paper. As you are a sovereign noble, I cannot sell you any verification paper, I replied. Hersher's expression froze in what I could only assume was shock. She recovered a beat later, however, and immediately began pleading on the grounds that we were from the same hometown. I sensed that she was going to drag us out, so I glared at her. If you continue to be so insistent, Professor Hersher, I will not invite you to participate in changing Schwartz and Weiss's clothes. That was enough to make Hersher shut her mouth. Thank God. I mean, you could also ask Ferdinand, or send a message to Ferdinand and Sylvester and ask if you could. I doubt you'd be able to, but you could ask. Professor Hersher's disciple. Immediately after Raymond taught me how to improve the magic circle, I was hurried out of the room. Hartman and Cornelius didn't seem to want me staying any longer than was necessary. Raymond had proven himself so capable with his explanations that I wanted to ask about the tools Ferdinand had left behind and how to improve them, but I couldn't sit around when my retainers were all being so prickly. Upon returning to the dormitory, Cornelius and Hartman instructed me to send a letter. It would be best to write to Lord Ferdinand, Cornelius said. He'll know better than anyone how Ehrenfest should deal with Professor Hersher's disciple. I shall gather intelligence on Raymond, Hartman added. I cannot imagine many will know of a random third-year apprentice med scholar, but I will see what I can do. We had ended up returning much sooner than fourth bell, and so my retainers busily got to work. Wilfred stared at me in confusion. What happened this time, she asked. Professor Hersher's new disciple is an apprentice scholar from Arensbach, I explained. His eyes shot open, and the most he managed in response was a startled, "What?" Assuming he has free access to Professor Hersher's laboratory, it's possible that all of our intelligence is flowing directly to Arensbach. Professor Hersher is already quite limited in what she knows, since she spends so little time in our dorm, but we must see just how severe the information leak is. It was safe to say that Raymond knew everything Professor Hersher did about the magic tools and circles she was researching. Given the absolute state the lab was in, it was likely impossible to hide anything from him. Would that mean they know everything of the magic circles we embroidered onto Schwartz and Weiss's clothes? Lysetta asked, looking worried. The magic circles existed to protect the shoe mills, but if our enemies know what activated them, and what they did when activated, it was more likely for their defenses to be penetrated. It will depend on how much Ferdinand has told Professor Hersher, but yes. Raymond will know most of what we brought back in documents, I said with a sigh, and then began writing an emergency letter to Ferdinand. It was sent to Ehrenfest the moment I was done. All we could do now was wait for a response. The common room was mostly populated with first-years who had finished their afternoon classes. Most of the second-years were attending their practical lessons, and while there were some third-years present, they were certainly in the minority. Cornelius and Riardo were my only retainers presently with me, since Hartmut and had swiftly left the dormitory after lunch to gather intelligence. I observed the magic circles that Raymond had corrected and tried to learn his methods. His circles were entirely different from my own. Raymond is a third year, I muttered to myself. He was just beginning his third-year classes, while I had already completed all of my second-year ones. In theory, we should have known about as much as each other. Judith had even mentioned that the third years hadn't learned any complicated circles yet. But Raymond was immersed in research with Hersher and attending Gundalf's lectures. So he knew far more about magecraft than I did. All the hard work he was putting into learning this stuff was clear from his suggested improvements, and I felt terrible about the way things had ended. He's clearly dedicated so much time to studying magecraft, I said. It's no wonder he was dying to read Lord Ferdinand's book. He's from Arensbach, Cornelius replied plainly, fixing me with a tight look. I could understand why his feelings toward the duchy were so harsh. He had no doubt spent the 2 years after that fateful night dwelling on what he viewed as his failure as a guard knight. But continuing one's desire to read is an important possible task, would you not agree? Or containing one's desire to read is an impossible task. Raymond has a book he wishes to read within his reach, and yet he cannot even touch it. My heart aches for him. I don't think you need to worry about that, Cornelius said with a sigh, slumping his shoulders. He came down onto his knees, and such that his head was right before my eyes. You are too tense, I said, and patted his light green eyes. Or light green hair, I'm sorry. What the fuck? What the fuck am I saying? His light green hair. It was almost on instinct, most likely from the days when I would do the same for Gil. I understand that being on guard is natural for a knight, but if you do not relax, at least while you are here in the dormitory, I fear that you will one day fall apart. Cornelius' expression softened, betraying his exasperation. He had gone from exuding the aura of a knight to that of an older brother. If you were more on guard, Rosamund, I wouldn't need to be. How else am I meant to act when the person I'm supposed to protect is getting all empathetic for the enemy? How do you know he's an enemy? Just because he's from Arensbach does not mean a gosh darn thing. He might not even be associated with Georgina and the others. Hello? You won't know until you get the information, of course. So I can understand being on guard until then, just in case, but still. Being unable to read a book is one of the greatest misfortunes you can experience, so yes, I do empathize, but I am not careless. I do not want to be hurt, nor do I intend to put myself in harm's way time and time again. Cornelius met my words with a dubious look, but before he could respond, the knights guarding the teleportation hall came rushing into the common room. An emergency reply from Lord Ferdinand, he announced. Upon hearing this, Cornelius returned to his feet, his expression hardening once again. I could guess that he wanted to retrieve the letter, but Riarda moved first. She took the paper with one swift movement, then handed it to me. I opened the letter, and as I started reading through it, my eyes widened. Ah. It seems Ferdinand is coming here tomorrow afternoon. I said, what? Uh-oh. Oh, dear. What's going to happen with that? I want to know. I want to be a fly on the wall for that conversation. I realize adults shouldn't visit the Royal Academy under normal circumstances, but it seems that he needs to speak with Professor Hersher about how his magic tools are being handled and treated. He has asked us to invite her to dinner tomorrow. He also wishes to know about the circumstances before they meet, and in that regard, he has asked us to compile what we discussed in the laboratory and the information available to us regarding Raymond. Ferdinand wanted us to find out a great deal about Raymond, such as what faction he belonged to in Arensbach, whether he was connected to Count Bindelwald, how much skill and knowledge he had when it came to magic tools, and how he viewed Ehrenfest. There's no time to gather that much information by tomorrow afternoon, my retainers wailed, but Ferdinand being unreasonable was nothing new. Ferdinand will decide whether Professor Hersher may attend the changing of Schwartz and Weiss's clothes, so we have no choice but to do whatever we can, I said. There was a chance he would move to restrain his teacher, so we need to provide him with as much ammunition as we could. Charlotte gave a firm nod of agreement. Sister, I will send my retainers to gather intelligence as well. In fact, all members of the Ehrenfest dormitory should use this opportunity to find out what they can. I shall rouse the troops. Uncle has found it necessary to break traditions for this visit, and we must prepare for his arrival as much as we can. Over dinner that night, we revealed that Professor Hersher's disciple was an apprentice scholar from Arensbach, and that Ferdinand would be coming to determine how we handle things moving forward. Then, once everyone was on the same page, we asked him to gather information. Yet more problems, I see, Ferdinand said as soon as he arrived with Justice and Eckert. He took a seat in the common room, extended a hand, and said, papers. Hartman was used to helping Ferdinand in the temple, so he wasted no time in presenting the prepared documents. Raymond is an apprentice med scholar not viewed all that favorably in Arensbach, he stated, beginning his explanation. His mother was born in Workstock and served the executed second wife. At the moment, he is being raised in a house that has fallen out of the times. He is on the lower end when it comes to mana, and nobody in his family has particularly high hopes for him. That seems to be why he is quite dedicated to Professor Hersher, who actually recognizes his talents. I see, and his connection to Count Bindelwald? we could not find one. He has so little mana that he has been struggling even with his research. He initially attempted to recreate the magic tools and circles you left behind on his own, but this shortcoming means he has to settle on simply improving them. It seems he admires you greatly as well. I am even told that he envies Lady Rosemine, who is both rich in mana and in a position to request your teachings directly. He has said that he wishes you could teach him, and that he fervently wishes to discuss your research with you. As it turned out, Raymond had wanted to join the all-nighter that Hersher and Ferdinand had pulled after last year's introductory tournament. He also envied Hartmut, who had the opportunity to work with Ferdinand and look after his books. He sounds very much like Heidemarie, Justice said with an expression like he was holding back laughter. Eckert responded with a pained expression while Ferdinand nodded in agreement. I can only blink in confusion, unsure who they were talking about. Riarda must have noticed this as she whispered in my ear that Heidemarie was Eckert's late first wife. She had apparently served Ferdinand as a scholar and had assisted him with his brewing. Wait, so both people in that relationship love Ferdinand to death? Wow! Wow, okay. I was positively stunned by these revelations, but it seemed the conversation had moved on without me. Are there any documents showing what Raymond has discovered through his research? Ferdinand asked. He modified one of my magic circles yesterday, I noted. I showed the circle in question, which elicited a slight bemused smile from Ferdinand. I am impressed you packed so much into it, he said, and then started carefully analyzing Raymond's improvements. After some time, he muttered, interesting, and shut his eyes in contemplation. It was a short while before Ferdinand opened his eyes again. My conclusion is that I wish to maintain relations with Raymond, and if possible, use him as a tool to gain information about Arensbach, he said. Our situation is not like before, when we can manage by cutting ties with our adversaries. We are now the 10th, meaning other duchies will want to gather intelligence on us. We are also doing business with Klassenburg and the Sovereignty, which brings us to the attention of the other top duchies. If they have someone who might be drawn in with innocuous research documents, it would be best to remain on guard, but nonetheless bait them into revealing their secrets. I will determine what documents Raymond may see, while all of you gather experience here in the World Academy. This will not be easy by any means, and we cannot expect help from adults who are already so set in their ways. The surrounding students nodded while I topped things off with enthusiastic understood. Ferdinand must have heard that, and after shooting me a look, he began to lightly tap his temple. However, I am forbidding Rosemine from speaking with Raymond. She will spill every secret she knows based on emotion and inertia. Let her communicate only through an apprentice scholar. Wait, just me, I exclaimed, protesting with wide eyes. I would rather not receive this kind of special treatment. He's got a point, though. You definitely need to be reined in, girl. Ferdinand glared at me. You have a strong tendency to be even softer on those who pull on your heartstrings. As someone raised in the temple, the ways that you think and act are fundamentally different from the rest of us. I cannot determine when or where you might suddenly consider someone an ally or even family, and that is why I cannot risk letting you speak to Raymond directly. It is much too dangerous. There was nothing I could say in response, especially when I was indeed prepared to accept Raymond as a fellow bookworm. Ferdinand knew me far too well. Yes, he does. He knows you the best out of everybody, probably besides Lutz. Or maybe even Benno. You are closer to the libraries and my magic tools than anyone, and you know much about trends and technologies that need to be remain concealed at all costs, Ferdinand said. Your lack of secrecy is deeply problematic, and if you cannot protect knowledge that must remain unknown, I will have you return to Ehrenfest at once. Yes, it is important that you gain more socializing experience, but your socializing impacts the future of our entire duchy. You have already finished your second-year classes, so it would be safest to call you back before you can make a cataclysmic error. Again, I was unable to argue. My scheduled tea parties were all professors or greater duchies, but even then I didn't want to be sent back. I had things to look forward to this year other than just reading after all. I would not like to be sent back to Ehrenfest before I could work in the library committee with Hannelore, I said. I do not wish to forbid you from spending time with your friends, but you have already contacted the Third Prince. Not by choice! That was just a coincidence that they met up! And are being targeted by Jawonkel. Yeah, I have to agree on that one. Take care not to worsen the situation such that I have no choice but to call you back, Ferdinand replied. I could do nothing but agree since I really was in a precarious situation. Those around you will need to take care as well, Ferdinand continued, turning his gaze to Wilfried and Charlotte. Raymond is attending Professor Gundolf's lessons, so I believe it will be wise to spread only some knowledge of my research, and then leave dealing with Jawonkel to Raymond and Professor Herschel. Tell them that only I know the details they seek. We can better control the information reaching Jawonkel through limiting what Raymond knows, rather than allowing Rosemine to attend a Jawonkel tea party and potentially leak everything. Ferdinand then turned to Hartmut. Raymond is but the first of many researchers who will soon open communications with Ehrenfest. You and the other apprentice scholars serving the Archducal family must handle them. Understood, Hartmut replied. The long-term prospects of our relationships with Raymond and our duchies mattered, but what was happening tomorrow mattered more. I've noticed voiced what I was most concerned about. Ferdinand, what about changing Schwartz and Weiss? What is planned on happening tomorrow? Neither Raymond nor Professor Herscher will attend. I have already allowed her a number of my documents, but just tell her that as a scientist, she should be able to figure out the rest on her own. They concern magic circles that I devised, but since their circles also belong to the sovereignty, the tools should not be shown to an apprentice scholar. From Ahrensbach, Ferdinand extended a hand to me. Rosamund, where are the documents I gave you to manipulate Professor Herscher? Feline, I called, and she brought them out at once for Ferdinand to flip through. He took out several particular sheets and returned the rest. These may be leaked without issue, Ferdinand said. Use them when necessary. I thank you ever so much. And with that, it was dinner time. Our discussion had proven quite long indeed, and Ferdinand had needed a chance to read over the prepared documents. Herscher arrived soon enough and greeted Ferdinand. It was with a perfectly calm expression that she mentioned what a surprise it was to have received a letter of invitation, but I could tell that she was feeling tense. To think you would come all this way, Ferdinand, she said. Adults were generally forbidden from meddling in Royal Academy affairs since it was believed that the children needed an opportunity to grow and accumulate experience. And although the children would at times send questions back home, it was highly unusual for an adult to arrive and call for a professor. This matter concerns magic tools of my own creation, and so my direct involvement was necessary, Ferdinand replied. Our current situation was his own mess, and there was nobody he could entrust to clean it up for him, and such was his excuse for getting involved personally. Ferdinand and Herscher's conversation continued all throughout dinner and showed no signs of stopping even when the last person had finished. During this time, they touched upon various matters such as how to deal with Raymond, how to handle the magic tools, and for future information sharing. There is a broader chasm between our duchies than your gathered intelligence will lead you to believe, Professor Herscher, Ferdinand went on. I was saved by your teaching philosophy myself, and I have no intention of rejecting it, but I must do what is expected of an Ehrenfest noble. Shall we treat Raymond as your disciple then, Ferdinand? Herscher asked. I am sure he would adore that. I will select the most innocuous magic circles and tools that I have made and give them to him as homework assignments. Should he manage to improve them, he may return them to me via an Ehrenfest scholar. I will evaluate them, then send new documents in return for information on Ahrensbach. I can already see him spilling all of Ahrensbach's secrets for those documents, Herscher said. That would actually be a good thing! That would be a great thing! She was wearing a bemused smile, but it seemed she had no intention of getting involved or interfering. Apparently, just as it was natural for knowledge to flow from teacher to student, it was not natural for knowledge to flow from student to teacher. Ferdinand would train Raymond as his disciple through long-distance communication and then invite him to Ehrenfest as a retainer once he came of age. Oh, I see. Is it possible that Ahrensbach will not permit him to leave, I asked. Of course, Ferdinand replied. They will not wish to lose a skilled researcher so easily. And if they wish to keep Raymond, they will need to grant him a lofty position, bringing him into the upper folds of the duchy. Such an outcome will allow me to attain even more meaningful information. He may either climb the social ranks in Ahrensbach or come to Ehrenfest as my retainer. So his only future now is to be your pawn. I guess that's fine, assuming he wants that, but As I debated the issue in my head, Herscher put on a soft smile. You certainly have changed, Ferdinand, she said. In the past, no matter how wonderful of a magic tool you made, you would lose interest upon completing it and set it aside forever. You showed so little investment that you would simply allow me to have any that took my fancy. To think that you would raise a disciple from afar, selecting which magic tools to give them, and carefully evaluating the results. It was a move in pursuit of gathering intelligence, but even then Herscher had not expected Ferdinand to work so hard for Ehrenfest. Throughout his time in the Royal Academy, he had presumably had to endure persistent interference from Veronica, all while receiving no credit for the works he actually completed. Politics change over the years, as do those shaken to and fro by its currents. Ferdinand said with a calm expression. He then headed to Herscher's laboratory with Eckert and Justice. It seemed that he would be taking back any magic tools that he did not want to risk Raymond modifying, such that even men nobles could use them. Some things were too dangerous to be allowed to spread far and wide. Soon enough, a magic circle spread out near the teleportation hall started producing one magic tool after another. They would pose a serious threat if activated accidentally, so lay nobles within the dormitory were tasked with carrying them one by one to the luggage carrier. There are this many dangerous magic tools? If the safe ones aren't even here, then just how many did Ferdinand make in total while he was in the academy? A lot. I asked with exasperation as I watched a small mountain form on the carrier. Hartman smiled. Will you not do the same, Lady Rosemine? I do not plan to. Is that so? I see a clear future in which you produce one bizarre magic tool after another, all while claiming that each is essential for the library. You can't argue with that! As I pursed my lips, Hartman crouched down so that only I could hear him. Lady Rosemine, when do you intend to accept Roderick's name? Hartman, I'm going to be graduating this year, so for next year onward, I will need to train a scholar who can stand between Raymond and you. Given that he is a med scholar, you will want a med scholar or arch scholar of your own for this, he explained, his orange eyes carrying a sense of real urgency. The Flame was doing her best, but status was something that no amount of hard work could overcome. Yeah, you do need to accept Roderick's name post-haste. The sooner he gets out of that situation, the better. Anyway, I will see everybody next time.